In August 1953, the CIA overthrew the democratically elected government of Iran. The operation cost approximately $1 million. It took 28 days. It installed a monarch whose secret police tortured thousands of his own citizens for 26 years. And when that monarch was overthrown in 1979, by a revolution whose rage was directed as much at the United States as at the Shah, the consequences produced a hostage crisis, decades of sanctions, proxy wars across the Middle East, and a regional power struggle that is still shaping the world right now. The CIA's own internal history calls Operation Ajax, and its British counterpart Operation Boot, the operation that taught the world's intelligence agencies that covert regime change was possible. What it actually taught the Middle East was something different. Here is the documented record of what happened and why the consequences have never ended. Mohammad Mossadegh was not a communist. This matters, because the CIA and British intelligence spent considerable effort portraying him as one in order to justify what they were planning. He was a Swiss-educated lawyer, an Iranian nationalist, and a democratically elected prime minister who had won his position through legitimate parliamentary process. He was also the man who nationalized Iran's oil industry in 1951, and that decision set everything in motion. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which would later become British Petroleum, had controlled Iranian oil since 1913 under a concession agreement that gave Iran approximately 16% of the profits from its own oil. The British kept the books closed. Iranian auditors were not permitted to verify the figures. In 1951, Mossadegh pushed through Parliament the nationalization of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, transferring ownership and control of Iranian oil to the Iranian state. The British reaction was immediate. They imposed an economic blockade, withdrew their technicians, and lobbied the United States to intervene. Initially, the Truman administration was reluctant. Secretary of State Dean Acheson privately considered Mossadegh a legitimate nationalist leader, and the British position, that their oil concessions superseded Iranian sovereignty, difficult to defend. Then Eisenhower was elected. His CIA director was Allen Dulles, whose law firm had represented Anglo-Iranian oil. His Secretary of State was John Foster Dulles, Allen's brother, same law firm. The reluctance evaporated. The planning began. The CIA's operational plan for overthrowing Mossadegh was written by a CIA officer named Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt. The plan had two components. The first was a propaganda campaign designed to convince the Iranian public and military that Mossadegh was a communist threat to Islam and the monarchy. The second was a direct bribery operation targeting Iranian military officers, parliamentarians, and street gang leaders. The CIA's own declassified history describes both in specific operational detail. Here is what they actually did. Kermit Roosevelt Jr. ran Operation Ajax from a CIA safe house in Tehran. The operation's budget, approximately $1 million, was used across 3 simultaneous tracks. The first track was propaganda. CIA-funded newspapers published fabricated stories portraying Mossadegh as a communist, an enemy of Islam, and a threat to the Shah. CIA-paid clerics delivered sermons against him. CIA-funded journalists wrote editorials. The Iranian public was consuming a media landscape that had been systematically purchased without knowing it. The second track was military. CIA officers made direct contact with Iranian military commanders, delivering cash payments and the implicit promise of American support in exchange for their cooperation when the moment came. Senior military officers were recruited to execute the actual removal of Mossadegh from power. The third track was the streets. CIA funds were used to hire Tehran street gangs, thugs and wrestlers from the Tehran Bazaar, to stage pro-Shah demonstrations, attack pro-Mossadegh newspapers, and create the appearance of a popular uprising against the Prime Minister. The CIA's own internal history uses the word rent to describe this process. They rented the mob. The first coup attempt on August 15, 1953 failed. Mossadegh had been warned. The Shah fled to Rome. Roosevelt did not leave Tehran. He regrouped, reorganized, and tried again 4 days later. On August 19th, the rented mob, the paid military, and the manufactured propaganda combined. Mossadegh was arrested. The Shah returned from Rome. Operation Ajax was declared a success. The Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi returned to Tehran on August 22, 1953. The CIA had restored him to a throne his own people had been in the process of moving past. What he did with that restored power, and what the United States enabled him to do, is the part of the story that most Cold War accounts minimize. With CIA assistance, the Shah established SAVAK, the Iranian secret police, in 1957. SAVAK was trained by the CIA and by Israel's Mossad. Its mandate was the identification, surveillance, and elimination of political opposition. Amnesty International reported in 1976 that Iran had the highest rate of death penalties in the world, that no country had a worse record of human rights, and that SAVAK's torture methods were among the most brutal documented anywhere. The CIA's own reporting on SAVAK's methods was classified. The public American position was that the Shah was a modernizing ally and a bulwark against Soviet expansion. For 26 years, the Shah governed Iran with American support and SAVAK's methods. Thousands of Iranians were tortured. Political opposition was systematically eliminated. The clergy, whose influence Mossadegh had carefully navigated, were pushed into opposition. A generation of Iranians grew up knowing that the United States had destroyed their democracy and replaced it with a torture state. That knowledge did not disappear. It accumulated. By 1978, the accumulated rage against the Shah and against the United States that had installed and sustained him had reached the point of revolution. What happened in 1979 and the specific chain of causation that runs directly from Operation Ajax to the Iranian hostage crisis, to the Iran-Iraq war, to Hezbollah, to the nuclear program, and to the regional power struggle consuming the Middle East right now. That chain is documented. And it begins in a CIA safe house in Tehran in August 1953. Here is how it connects. In January 1979, the Shah fled Iran for the last time. The revolution that replaced him was led by Ayatollah Khomeini, a cleric whose political theology explicitly identified the United States as the Great Satan and framed American intervention in Iranian affairs as the defining injustice of the 20th century. That framing resonated with millions of Iranians because it was historically accurate. Operation Ajax was not a secret in Iran. Every Iranian knew what had happened in 1953. The revolution was not simply anti-Shah. It was anti-American in a way that was specific, documented, and historically grounded. In November 1979, Iranian students seized the American embassy in Tehran and held 52 American diplomats hostage for 444 days. The hostage crisis consumed the Carter presidency and ended it. The specific grievance that motivated the embassy seizure, that the United States had admitted the Shah for medical treatment and might be planning another coup, was a direct consequence of 1953. The students who seized the embassy called it the Den of Spies. They had found CIA documents inside that confirmed American intelligence operations in Iran going back decades. The Iran-Iraq War, in which the United States provided intelligence support to Saddam Hussein's Iraq as it fought Iran from 1980 to 1988, killed approximately 1 million people. Iranian support for Hezbollah in Lebanon, which produced the 1983 Beirut barracks bombing killing 241 American Marines, traces to the post-revolutionary period. Iranian nuclear ambitions, the program that has driven American and Israeli foreign policy for 2 decades, were accelerated by the conviction that only nuclear weapons could deter American regime change. The chain runs directly from 1953 to the present. For decades, the United States government neither confirmed nor denied its role in the 1953 coup. The CIA's internal history of Operation Ajax, written in 1954, 1 year after the operation, was classified top secret and remained classified for nearly 60 years. In 2000, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright made a partial acknowledgement, stating that the coup was clearly a setback for Iran's political development and expressing regret. She did not use the word coup. She did not formally apologize. In 2013, the National Security Archive obtained the CIA's own internal history of Operation Ajax through a Freedom of Information request. The document, written by the operation's own participants in 1954, confirmed every element of the documented record. The propaganda campaign, the bribed military officers, the rented mob, the 2 coup attempts, the CIA's role in establishing SAVAK. It was all in the CIA's own words, written the year after it happened. In 2013, the CIA formally acknowledged on its own website that it had been involved in the coup, the first official public acknowledgement in 60 years. The Iranian government noted the acknowledgement. They did not consider it sufficient. No formal apology has ever been issued. No reparations have ever been offered. The families of Iranians tortured by SAVAK, the organization the CIA helped create, have received nothing. The CIA admitted it in 2013. 60 years after the fact. No apology, no reparations. And there is one final element of this story that almost nobody covers: what Operation Ajax revealed about the permanent architecture of American covert power that was used again and again after 1953. And the specific lesson that every government watching in 1953 drew from what the CIA had done, a lesson that shaped covert operations, proxy wars, and regime change attempts for the rest of the Cold War and beyond. Operation Ajax was not an isolated event. It was a template. Within a year of the Iran coup, the CIA used the same operational framework to overthrow the democratically elected government of Guatemala. Operation PB Success, 1954. In 1960, the CIA plotted the assassination of Congolese Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba. In 1973, the CIA supported the military coup that overthrew Chilean President Salvador Allende. The template established in Tehran in 1953, propaganda, military bribery, manufactured popular unrest, was used repeatedly across 3 decades of Cold War covert operations. The lesson that other governments drew from 1953 was equally consequential. If the United States was willing to overthrow a democratically elected government to protect oil company profits, a government that posed no military threat, that had committed no act of aggression, that had simply nationalized a natural resource, then no government that made economic decisions the United States disliked could consider itself secure. That lesson accelerated arms races, drove non-aligned nations toward the Soviet Union, and created the conditions for the proxy conflicts that defined the Cold War's second half. Iran in 2024 is the most direct and most enduring consequence. The Iranian government's hostility toward the United States is not irrational. It is historically grounded in a specific documented event that the CIA itself has confirmed. The nuclear program, the proxy forces, the regional power projection. All of it is driven partly by the institutional memory of 1953 and the conviction that the United States will attempt regime change again if the opportunity presents itself. Operation Ajax cost $1 million and 28 days. Its consequences have cost, in treasure, in lives, in regional stability, an amount that no serious analyst has ever been able to calculate because the chain of causation has never stopped. Operation Ajax. August 1953. $1 million. 28 days. One democratically elected government destroyed. One Shah installed and sustained for 26 years with American support and CIA-trained secret police. One revolution in 1979 whose rage was historically grounded in what had happened in 1953. One hostage crisis, one Iran-Iraq war, one regional proxy network, one nuclear program driven partly by the memory of regime change. 60 years before the CIA acknowledged it happened. No apology, no reparations. The Dulles brothers represented Anglo-Iranian oil before they ran American foreign policy. The CIA rented a mob to overthrow a democracy. The consequences have never stopped arriving. History's dark archives. The operation ended in 1953. The archive shows it never really did.